paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jenn Durrell.
Hey.
Well, hey, baby.
Hey, baby.
I'm so excited about tonight's show because it's our special Valentine's Day episode.
Yeah.
Which probably requires me, or it doesn't require me, but I want to, in front of our entire audience, in front of God, to say how much I adore and love you and how lucky I am to do this show.
Dean.
So happy Valentine's Day, Jen.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Now, with the romance out of the way, although I'm sure there'll be more romantic stories tonight, we have such a fantastic guest. You and I first became, I guess, aware of her or saw her doing, I guess it was like the opening act for the Milwaukee Paracon.
Yeah.
Last year, it was like the summer or something of last year. And I think she did like a drinking ghost kind of thing as the opening.
Yeah.
And you were watching in Missouri.
Yeah.
And I was watching here and we were just going, this is hilarious.
Yes.
She is so entertaining. So that's our special guest for tonight. Mm-hmm. And she's a mostly fictional character who has dedicated herself to the telling of tales and spirits and the tales of spirits and the spirit of telling a good tale. She has a disturbing and entertaining knowledge of both the supernatural and the best libations to accompany them. She resides in the city of Milwaukee, arguably the best place on earth to hone the skills of both drinking and storytelling. She is also the co-host of T's Weird Week podcast. So I'm delighted to introduce our very special guest, the one and only Heidi Erickson.
Hello, friends.
Hey.
Hey, Heidi.
Hey.
Happy Ferris wheel day to you, my friends.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us on the Ferris wheel.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. I'm always up for a Ferris wheel. You can't stop me from getting on a Ferris wheel, especially have a couple cocktails. Lord knows.
As long as you don't, have that famous fair accident on the people below when you've drunk too much and ate too many corn dogs.
Oh God!
I would never. I would raise proper. I would just find a hat. A civilized person. Yeah.
Well, you understand the importance of civilized drinking because you and I were chatting a little bit on Facebook the other day, and perhaps particularly important in these weird socially distanced times, you were saying how important that the whole act of drinking and socializing and storytelling is and how they all intersect. You can probably describe it far better than I kind of just did. So do you want to tell us about the importance of all those things and how they interconnect?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always been a storyteller, but I didn't really appreciate how important it was until I became a bartender. And being a bartender is really just being able to tell stories and hear stories and understand what parts of those stories are important to people. And also to be able to make out what people are saying when they're 4 shots and 3 beers to the wind. Mm-hmm. Which is when people get loose and start saying like what they really mean and like telling those stories that really affect and impact them, because you always tell a story better to a room full of like almost strangers than you do like even in the company of your closest friends. That's something that's magic about like going to the pub. That's why the pub is a magical place. That's why like back in the day before we had the internet, like the pub was the center of any town. It was where, more so than a church, more so than anything else, it was the pub. And that's where people went to retell those stories, excuse me, because a lot of people weren't literate. Everything that was passed down about the place that they lived and about their family was about an oral tradition. And it was important to have those spaces that you could make merry and like have an audience to tell those stories to, otherwise they would have died. So, I mean, like it's a huge part of everybody's culture to be able to knock back a pint and tell a story.
And do you think the supernatural slides into those stories as well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because, the two best ways to learn about a culture, right, is their comedy and their horror. And a really good pub ghost story has both of those things. Like you should be scared, but also you should be laughing. So like when things get rough, especially like you and I were talking about your fest, about the Weird Fest, and we were talking about the resurgence of good horror because there was a freaking apocalypse. Everything stopped. The world as we knew it came to a total stop, and all of a sudden there was all of this really good horror happening again because we all got connected again with what was scaring the shit out of us, which was like, oh my God, none of this seems real, which is why a lot of horror that has recently been happening is about seeing the truth that's underneath this kind of saccharine fabricated illusion. And it's so necessary because we have to get that out somewhere, and we have to be able to look across the theater at a total stranger and see that they too are scared shitless. Like we have to have that connection with other people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's one of the hard things actually about the COVID restrictions are things like that communal experience that we share when we all sit in a cinema, like you were talking about now. There's or in a bar trading stories, there's something very innate to the human spirit to want to share those collective experiences. And I think you're dead right when it comes to sharing, whether it's comedy and we're laughing at those things together. It's always funnier when the whole audience is laughing, or when somebody's laughing at your joke, or you're laughing at their joke with half a dozen other people. But it's also just as compelling to jump in your seat at a horror movie when everybody else in the audience jumps in their seat, or sitting around a campfire and somebody's telling a terrifying story, and that everybody's terrified. I'm not going to mention the filmmaker's name, but I told you this as well when we were trading stories the other day, Heidi, and then I'll move on. When I had a filmmaker guest visit me here in the Northwoods a number of years ago, my great joy was pumping his head full of stories about Dogman and Sasquatches, because this area up north is filled with these things. And he was so terrified. It worked so effectively, much to my enjoyment. Now I sound like a sadist, and I'm not really. But he wouldn't stay at the campfire. He wouldn't stay at my fire pit by himself. He had to come inside with me. But that's the wonderful thing, that effect of having that impact on somebody with a tale. It's a wonderful thing.
Because you've been scared of Dogman. Like surely up in that cabin all by yourself, you've had nights where you're like, oh my God, Bigfoot is going to come in here and no one's going to know that I got just smashed to death by a Bigfoot. That's like you've been afraid. So to see your friend equally be like, oh my God, there's what the hell's a dog man? Are you serious? Like, that's a vulnerable moment. Like you guys just had together, a beautiful, vulnerable moment via dog man. Thank you, dog man.
Absolutely. And tonight, because I know we're going to try to have that kind of communal feeling tonight where we're all having a drink or two, and you're going to be the storyteller who guides us, hopefully through a virtual version of this experience, which we all so miss. But you have to tell me, because I know you're an expert at mixing drinks and telling tales. What are you drinking tonight? You have to let the audience know. And Jen and I.
This little gem, this little frippery. This is a love potion number 9. Love potion number 9, because we're on a theme, and I love a theme. This is all about Valentine's Day and love and stuff. The love potion number 9 is one of those exceptional cocktails in that it's like a meatloaf or something. Everybody makes it a little bit differently, but the basic ingredients are strawberry and vodka. And I was like, I can absolutely make that work. And I had plans, y'all. Listen, I had such ambitions. I was like, I'm going to get Ancho Reyes bitters because then it'll be hot and kind of bitter. Wouldn't that be poetic? My God, I'm a genius. Yeah. Fun fact, it's really cold, like really, really, really cold. And I didn't have any of those things. So this is just vodka.
We're meant to get below 35 wind chills tonight up here in the Northwoods, by the way. So it's cold.
I'm excited about it. This is funny. Like, I know a lot of scary stories. I'm obsessed with them. And like, I like talking about that stuff. There is nothing I have ever read or heard or conjured up in my own depraved imagination that is anywhere near as terrifying as a night in February in Wisconsin. Actually scary. I walked outside and I couldn't feel my fingers. I couldn't feel my face. I'm like, I could be half dead right now and I'd never even know it. I would not even know it was happening to me. I don't know why we live here. And I
Well,
mean,
I
the
always,
beer is good, but come on.
Yeah.
yeah, I always worry I'm going to slip over outside when I'm taking care of my chickens or something, and they'll find me in the spring, and that'll
Wait.
be.
Taking care of your chickens, Dean?
Yes.
Yeah,
Like,
Yes.
I have chickens.
He has chickens.
And actually, here's a little side story because you were talking about being scared of the dog man, and then I'm really going to shut up because you're a better storyteller than I am. But you were saying you've been scared of the dog man before, and I'm thinking, was I ever before I told that story? And I thought I was. I used to have guinea fowl as well, and one night a number of summers ago, I don't know if you've ever heard guinea fowl. They make a noise they're a crazy bird, and they're not really domesticated at all. They're originally from, I think, sub-Saharan Africa somewhere. And in the middle of the night, my guinea fowl started going like crazy, like something was clearly trying to kill them. And I went out there, and it was like a horror movie. I went out with, a torch and a gun, and I was like circling around looking, and there was these birds just making a deafening noise. And I'm like, I have no idea what's here, but there's something here, So yeah, that was the dog man terror night, I guess.
Yeah, I can see that. See, now I hear that and that sounds scary to me, but you're talking to someone who's actually been locked inside of a chicken coop. So I'd be way more scared of the guinea fowl than I would be of the dog man.
Oh my goodness.
Oh gosh.
Chickens are like, so many people love chickens, and I love that they love chickens, and I'm happy from them. Chickens are horrifying animals. I would rather be stuck with a hyena than like 6 chickens, because look over your eyes. They're vicious. Like if a chicken decides it doesn't like, you know what I'm saying? Have you ever been attacked by a chicken?
My roosters had a go at me one of my roosters has had a go at me a couple of times. My vicious one, but yeah.
Yeah, tell him the name of the chicken though, your rooster. What's his name?
That rooster's name is Cockagooey, because that's my daughter named him Cockagooey. And there's also a rooster called Elvis, which Jen's son named.
Sure.
And the other one's called Reddy, even though it's a Buff Orpington, so it's yellow. When it was little, it had a red stripe, which became the comb. So my daughter called it Reddy because it had this little red stripe. Anyway, that's not particularly terrifying for our audience. We have to let you segue into one of your haunted love stories that we brought you on to hear.
So I gotta tell you, it's true. I was doing a little research for this because we were talking about this before too. Is that old-fashioned ghost stories, at least in Western culture, they tend to be morality tales. They tend to be warnings to the living for doing or not doing specific things. So there's a ton of old-fashioned ghost stories that are about lost love and about lost lovers. There's a story of Emily's Bridge in Florida, where the bride was getting married, and apparently her veil caught fire, and so did the bride. And Lord bless her, she didn't quite make it to the honeymoon. So now, I know. Like it's almost never grooms. Isn't there? Like if the ghost groom is floating, it's always the bride. It's always trust me, I looked. It's like always the bride. Anyway, they see this poor woman wandering around. I guess you can't hardly miss her because she's like on fire or whatever. And they watch her walking through the swamp. And the way that you know it's the ghost bride and not some other pyrotechnic situation is that she's screaming, sure, and then she dives into the swamp to put herself out, because I guess that's what happened in real life. Right. And so people all around there, they see her all the time and they hear shrieking, and I guess they smell burning fabric, which is a creepy, gross thing for a ghost to do. I don't care for that at all. I don't need smells. Absolutely not. I'll take scratching and banging and like no smells. No.
At least it was fabric and not. I think you're going to say the smell of human flesh.
Yeah.
Right.
Burning.
I hear that just smells like barbecue though. So and this is Florida.
Barbecue.
It's Florida. You wouldn't hardly notice. You'd be like, oh, must be Thursday. So I didn't find that. I didn't like most of the old-fashioned like love stories that are about like the screaming, crying bride. Like I don't find they're not as scary as they are like sad. Like something has always happened to poor Victoria, where she's grown pale and wan, and her lover doesn't arrive, and she throws herself from the window, and you're like, Jesus, this is horrible. Like it's not scary. That's just a bummer. Like Jesus, woman, like go to the bar, have a drink, hook up with some sailor, just get over it. It's not that big a deal. And it's never like that. The one story that I did find from olden times of like a gentleman who was a lost love and became a specter was of the gray man. And this is actually from where I grew up in South Carolina. He's one of my favorite kinds of ghosts. He's a harbinger of doom. Because you're supposed to, yeah, isn't that great? I wish I want to be a harbinger of doom. It's so great to have an awesome job in the afterlife. Like, most people just retire, but not me. I'm keeping busy. I'm a harbinger of doom. The gray man, you're supposed to like see him before a hurricane. And I actually became aware of him when I was a little girl, because in 1989 was the year the Berlin Wall came down, kids. If you want to fetch me my Centrum silver. There was a big ass hurricane, is Hurricane Hugo, which we stayed for because my dad was not about to get kowtowed by some, pussy hurricane. 200-mile-an-hour winds, whatever. I was in the Navy. Okay, Dad. So we stayed.
I like the sounds of your dad.
Yeah.
Oh, to be fair, my dad's a hoot and a holler. Like, he honestly is. He's a tough mamma jammer. He's a big Italian dude, like fists like cassava melons. He's not scared of nothing. I'll tell you another time about a ghost story about my dad, but that's for another time. It's definitely not a love story. We were there, and there was a place called McClellanville, and McClellanville was to the south of us. Pretty much everybody got the snot knocked out of them by that storm, but the people in McClellanville got just straight rolled because the storm surge came in there. So it was like this 12-foot wall of water that just came into McClellanville and just ruined everybody's lives, and a bunch of people died, and a bunch of people ended up stuck on the rafters of like the gym that was the shelter as the water was rising up and up and up. Bad news, not cool. But they should have damn well known better, because for like 2 weeks before that, all the Ogullah ladies on the islands were talking about how they had been seeing the gray man, right? Who is this spectral creature. There's a bunch of stories of who the gray man is. My favorite version is that he was this character who had gone off to the war, which down south means the Civil War, and every other war has a name, but this is the war. He went off to the war, and he was trying to come back to his bride-to-be, his fiancée or whatever, and en route on the way there, because she lived out on one of the little islands, there was like a giant wave that knocked him over and he drowned. And then like 2 weeks later or whatever, there was a big hurricane coming, and she heard him calling to her out on the beach. And so she went looking for him because she didn't know for sure he was dead. He was just missing. He was gone. He was the soldier who was supposed to be coming back. Did he get waylaid? Is he at the Holiday Inn? We don't know. She heard him calling, and instead of seeing him, she saw just his shadow on the beach. And he told her that she had to get off of the island and go inland because there was a big storm coming and it was going to wipe everything out. And then lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. A big hurricane came and ruined the island. He was the only gentleman, though. He was the only gentleman I could find. Everybody else was ladies. Unless you're like, that's just us, though. Right now, like, if you want to tell mostly like Asian ghost stories, they're just lousy with lost love. They're just crazy. Like, every third person on the street has got somebody. They were going to get married, and then there was a ghost who came into the place they were getting married. Food was levitating. Egg rolls were everywhere. There's a whole ghost demon creature that's just a butt. It's just a butt with an eyeball in it, and it comes for you if you are not like with a person. It's just like, I want to make a study of it. I really, really do. Because that's just the mythological aspect. There's still places in parts of China right now where you can marry a dead person. Like, really, truly be married to a dead person. Not like on a lark or like to upset your parents or because you just really liked that movie, The Crow, or whatever your deal is. But like, somebody dies, right? And if this person passes away and they were unwed, the going thinking is that they're going to be really unhappy in the afterlife, right? And in parts of China, like, they're terrified of the idea of like the ghosts of any ghosts being upset, and they go to great lengths to make sure their ghosts are very, very happy. But if it's especially someone you're related to, they don't want that. So if like a young man or woman in their family dies unmarried, they will find a broker a marriage broker person who will find another dead person who has a complementary astrological chart, and then they'll go to that person's family. Yeah. Then they'll have a marriage, a wedding, where instead of the bride and groom, it's just the pictures of the bride and groom from their funerals. Bada bing, bada boom, these people are married. Then they dig up the bones of the woman and they bury her bones in the tomb of the man whom she's now married to, even though they're dead.
Gosh.
So, I mean, that's very romantic. It's very sweet and very romantic. The only problem with this is, yes, I know it's shocking. There is a problem with the whole marrying dead people thing. Try not to be too surprised. Is that there's a lot more men in China than there are women as a general rule.
Yeah.
Okay, you see where I'm going with this? So sometimes there aren't enough dead ladies to marry to your dead gentleman. So what happens when you need dead people and you don't have dead people is you make dead people, okay? Right? So I know. So there's become this whole unpleasant market in China because like people are so concerned about not having angry ghost relatives that they pay people who will maybe acquire a dead person without the consent of the dead person's family and then sell it to those people for, I'm going to call it a steep markup, like a real steep markup. And when those people can't find a corpse, they'll just create one. They'll go out and let's kill people. So that's right. It's bad, right? That's obviously like, I hate to paint anything with a broad brush, but that to me feels bad just all the way around. But it's almost not as bad because the thing about it is the way that they get live people to marry dead people a lot of the time is they'll trick them into it. So you could be a dude walking down the street in China and see like a red envelope in the street. And if you pick it up and inside the envelope, there's a bunch of ghost money, which is paper money that people burn at altars to like, it's essentially Western Union to your dead relatives. You're sending money to them. And he opens it up and that's what's inside there. Then the relatives of this dead woman will jump out of the shadows and be like, gotcha, sucker, you're married to a ghost. And he can't say no. He cannot say, I mean, like he can, but he will be shamed out of his family. So he has to be married to the ghost. And like there's dowries that get exchanged and like it's a whole thing. He can marry again later. He can have another wife. But if he wasn't married before he got roped into the ghost marriage thing, he has to forever regard the dead lady he never met as his first wife, as his most important wife. And like has to consult her on like decisions in the household. And like his new wife has to ask her permission for stuff and things. It's very messed up. But if you're a woman and you get tricked into marrying a dead guy, then you got nothing but problems because you're not allowed to marry again. You have to be celibate for the rest of your life.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. You can't have another husband. You're not allowed to have more than one husband. But that's crazy. We marry ghosts around here, but you can't have more than one husband. That's ridiculous. So you have to go live with your in-laws, your ghost in-laws, and essentially just serve them for the rest of your life while you're married to your ghost husband. And that's it.
So what if the ghost doesn't like who they were met up with? I mean, I would haunt. I would not be happy if somebody gave me somebody I didn't care about.
Right. I'd be very upset about it. I'd be like, this person does not like dogs or baseball. I can't believe that you set us up. It's bogus. It's bogus. But technically that can't happen because you go to a special marriage broker who sets you up with a special ghost spouse. And you get this like amazing 15 first date situation with the ghost. I don't know. I wouldn't want to be married to a ghost. The thing about it is that there's a lot of like ladies in China who allegedly will go out looking to get married to a ghost because they don't actually want to be married to a dude. They don't want to be married to anybody. They're like, I'm not into being married. I don't really like that, but it's not okay to be a spinster. So they'll be like, I'm married. He's just dead. And I don't appreciate your tone. And then they're fine forever. So, I mean, there's upsides to it.
Can you have like can you have like a big love style situation where you're married to 3 ghosts if you're a man? Like, is there a
I don't
limit on
know.
how many
Oh
ghosts you could be married
wow.
to?
Hey.
I mean, I guess if that's the case, if you can have more than one wife, like you could probably make a little cottage industry off of just running around marrying dead broads. Hey, yeah,
Mhm.
like yeah, you could
I'm
retire
honestly,
on
I'm
that.
thinking about
Because
that.
some of these dowries that they give to people, like the bride prices are like huge. They're ridiculous, like houses, servants, cars, jewelry, swimming pools, movie stars, the whole shebang. So yeah, you could hypothetically get kind of rich off it. I reckon that's probably true. Or like
Wow.
if you were the younger brother and you wanted to get married before one of your older brothers, but you had another older brother who was dead and he wasn't married, you could marry off the dead older brother so that you could have permission to get married.
Oh.
All that.
That's messed up.
Ah, that should be that's another job waiting there for you, Heidi. You could go and broker this
Oh
stuff
no.
yourself. You seem to have your head around it pretty well. You see the
I
angles.
mean, I'm seeing the math. I'm not gonna lie. Like from even a distance, I'm seeing the math. I think it's a doable thing. And to be fair, like I don't know. I watch like Lifetime television. There's worse ways to go about marriage. Like you ever watch it like Say Yes to the Dress show? All those
Oh
women are
my
horrible.
goodness.
They're all horrible. I'd marry those off to dead dudes like in a heartbeat in a second. Be like, get out of here. Get off there.
Yeah.
Shut your mouth. Quit talking to me.
That are
Good
those
Lord.
brides. What is the name of the one with the brides that are like
Bridezilla?
horrendous?
Right.
Bridezilla?
Gosh.
They're wretched, right? You're like, you know
Yeah,
what you need.
I can't even when I watch it. Yeah.
No, it's too
Crazy.
much. It's really too much. But they can marry a dead guy, and then that'll learn them. That'll set them straight.
I wonder if that whole bride aesthetic is one of the reasons, Heidi, that you get more brides than
Sure.
groom ghost stories, and not necessarily just because we have that bridezilla image of the monstrous bride who has all these demands, but I'm talking about the actual aesthetic of there's something spookier about somebody in a big white dress perhaps moving
Right.
through the night than there is somebody in a
Yeah.
tuxedo, or
Right.
or whatever.
Yeah, right. Tuxedos can be scary. No, they can't. That's wrong. Only if Danny DeVito is wearing one. No, because they look like burial shrouds, right? Like the big
Yeah.
long sheets that we used to think of
Mhm.
when we thought of ghosts. But yeah, a lot of those old stories, like don't just revolve around brides, but about women in general. There's something that
Yeah.
Western culture is really like obviously very nervous about as far as women who have been wronged, hence the whole
Uh-huh.
hell hath no fury kind of situation. And it shows in our
Mhm.
fiction. It shows in what we're afraid of.
Absolutely.
Which
Yeah.
I'm fine with. Like that's fine. You should be scared.
I-
I am a dangerous,
Yeah.
dangerous
I'll
creature.
tell you another woman in white walking through the night story. And my mother's probably watching, as is my stepfather. Hi, folks. They always watch our show. They're so supportive in Australia. It was a story I was raised on. And as I became an adult, I thought it was just mythology. But then I got shown just before I moved to America, my mother had kept a news clipping and she actually showed me the story. So it was a legit story. There was a member of our family from, long before I was born, who every night they would find weird, like wet footsteps in the house, and her like
Mhm.
nightgown would be like it would be wet, and they didn't know what was going on. So they
Mhm.
waited and they followed this young woman at night, and she woke up and she slept walked, and they followed her out of the house, and she went into I don't know if it was a lake or a billabong or whatever it was in Australia, but she went night swimming totally in a sleepwalking state. And when they saw her out night swimming, they called to her and she woke up
Mhm.
and she drowned. Like she panicked
Yeah.
and drowned.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I'd been told that
shit.
story since I was little, and I thought it was
Yeah.
just total nonsense. And then no, my mother showed
No.
me the news clipping, and it was a true story.
No, because you're not supposed to wake people up
Yeah.
when they're in
Yeah.
that state. Because
No.
even when they're not night swimming in a billabong in Australia, that's horrifying. Do people just regular do that? Don't you guys have giant crocodiles and like big scary dudes with knives and like spiders that like have machetes or like some shit like that? I
We have
thought
all
like
kinds of
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. Mind you, here in the North Woods, we have like cougars, and I don't mean the attractive middle-aged women. I mean like actual
Wow.
cougars that'll come and will kill you. And we have bobcats and bear and wolves and coyotes. So people always say, "Oh, in Australia, there's all these things you can kill you." And I'm like, "Yeah, like a snake or a spider. It's not a bear that's going to eviscerate me because I go out to feed
Okay.
my chickens in the middle of the
Yeah.
night." You know what I mean?
Okay. That's fine, but at no point in time am I going to put my foot in a shoe and there's a bear in my shoe. If
That's
there's a
true.
bear coming at me, I'm going to know that in advance. That's not going to be a surprise bear. That's not what happens. It's bear and not bear. That's it. I'm just saying. Or like I'm not going to sit down on the toilet and a bobcat's going to come at. Like that's not going to happen to me. Most of the time, if I'm in the house, I'm safe, even from the dog man. There's
Well,
not.
but you're in
spiders.
Milwaukee, mind you, not that far from Milwaukee. You've got the Beast of Bray Road, so you might be driving one night, break down,
Yeah.
out it
Yeah.
comes, fangs, claws.
There is so much creepiness in Wisconsin. I have to tell you, I have lived all over the world. I've lived all over the place. And by far the creepiest place in the world to live is in the state of Wisconsin. There's more weird shit in this place than in Madame Tussauds. It's just crazy. You got the Beast of Bray Road. You got the ghost lights on Witch Road. You got like whole cities that just like sank underneath their own weight and burnt to the ground 3 different times. Like the whole state is just odd as hell. The only other place I've ever lived half as scary as this was Scotland. Also a very creepy place. But Wisconsin is right strange. A very, very, very strange place.
Yeah, that's what
I'm not sure.
inspired me to do Midwest Weird Fest, because I came here and I'd run genre festivals in Australia for for over a decade, and I started hearing all these stories. Like Ed Gein, for goodness sakes, lived within driving distance of where I am now. And there's, like you said, the Beast of Bray Road. There's the Hodag. There's Sasquatches. There's the Birdman of Moston. There's the midgets of Haunchyville, those retired circus workers who will murder you supposedly if you go and disturb.
That's one of
their
my
retirement.
favorites, my absolute favorites. I actually used to live in the Paper Valley, which is Appleton, Oshkosh area, which was the final terminus of the circus circuit back in the 20s. And as a result, there's a higher percentage of little people who make their homes there than any place else in the country, or one of them in the country, another one's in Florida. And we took a lot of pride in that and in telling those stories about the circus. Like, have you been to Showman's Rest in Chicago? Do you know about Showman's Rest?
No.
Oh my God, it's so crazy. There was this train crash, you guys. Okay, so towards the end of the whole desperation, Great Depression, Dust Bowl situation, the circus was kind of on its last legs, because people couldn't pay to do the circus anymore. People were getting money and jobs again, and so there were fewer people who wanted to work for the circus because it was a horribly underpaid and abusive job. That was the kind of shit you did when you didn't want to ever see anybody that you went to high school with ever again. Right around this time that this is happening, they moved everything on trains, on great big trains. All the animals, all of the tents, all of the everything, and everything, I swear, that was in a circus was made of just gasoline. It just was super flammable and dangerous, and even the elephants were combustible. It's bad news bears. So 28 or 1932, right outside of Chicago, one of these great big giant circus trains crashed, and everything lit ablaze because there was lanterns and stuff that were there because they didn't have electricity, and it was such a god awful mess. So many animals and performers died or could not be accounted for in this train crash that they just buried them right there. And there was a mass grave of circus people and circus animals. And now there's a big monument in Chicago called Showman's Rest. And they continued to bury famous circus performers there for years afterwards as kind of an homage to all these people who died in this original big scary thing. And Showman's Rest is supposed to be haunted as balls, haunted by circus clowns, you guys. Haunted by elephants and zebras. Haunted. So the Midwest is odd. I'm telling you, it's a very strange place. I think the longer we talk
There's
about the
like
Midwest, the more strange stories are just going to come up.
There's like a glitch in the matrix when it comes to circus trains. I'm not sure what it is. I have a cafe near where I live. Like it's one of the closest. I live in the middle of nowhere. It's one of the closest cafes to. And I say cafe, it's like a little diner, really, right? And I had no idea, but I'm not that far from a rail line, and this place is even closer to it. There's photos all over the wall there of a famous circus crash that happened there back in like there. I don't know what the date, 1930s or 1940s, like that, maybe even early, somewhere between I'd say the teens and the 40s, right? And there's photos of like I think even dead animals and elephants and things. But I regularly hear cryptid stories where there's a place where there's wild black cats, for example, where there shouldn't be. I mean, big jaguar type black cats. And they'll be like, well, there was a circus derailment back in 1952, and we wonder if that was one of the. So there seems to be this. You wouldn't think there was multiple circus derailments of circus trains, but I keep bumping into them. Like I literally only heard about one the other day.
You wouldn't think that unless you lived in Wisconsin for any extended period of time. Like there's just endless creep. I'm going to tell you this one other super creepy thing before I get to the story I actually came to tell, which I'm very excited to tell you because I'm actually like legitimately pissed off about it, and I want to share it with you. I'm angry. Like I'll get to it. Don't worry. All of the stereotypes, good, bad, indifferent, they all come to Wisconsin to die. That's just real life. That's what happens. That's why you got exorcisms happening here. That's why you got not one or two, but like a baker's dozen cannibalistic serial killers. Like that stuff happens all the time. One of the creepiest places in the universe is in Wisconsin. It's a place called the Novitiate. You ever heard of the Novitiate? Oh, it's so odd. It's by a place called Gresham. The Novitiate is one of the oldest structures, like stone structures in the state of Wisconsin. It was built before Wisconsin was even a state, and it was originally a monastery for years and years and years. And then something happened, and it wasn't anymore, which is very strange and weird, and it sat abandoned for some time. And then one of the indigenous tribes that was up that way was like, this is our land, and you can't have it. And they essentially took over the abandoned building of the novitiate, and the feds came in, and there was a firefight, and a bunch of people just got straight up murdered. And then it was abandoned again for a long period of time. And then there was like rumors of occult activity. Because of course, if you have an abandoned monastery in the woods where a bunch of people got straight up murdered, why would you not just go there to call the devil? Because if you're, I mean, if you're going to do it, you got a perfectly good building right there. But the novitiate is just plagued with ghost stories. For a long time, you couldn't get anywhere near it. There's a great big tall fence, which was super strange in the woods in the middle of a state park, Hayman Falls State Park it was called, which has since been purchased by some like property developer, probably from fucking Chicago. Anyway, they're just like there, and because they buy everything, don't they? They're gonna put a Starbucks in there right away. I don't know. But like people would have reports of seeing like robed luminescent figures walking back and forth between the cathedral windows, and like hearing screams and gunshots in the middle of the night when there was like nobody around for miles and miles and miles. Like very creepy place. And the going notion for a long time was that there was a doorway to hell inside the novitiate that all of these occultists had opened up, like using the like dead spirits of all these like indigenous people who got shot. Super crazy. And then like 10 years ago, somebody purchased the property and they were going to turn it into a bed and breakfast, because if you got a gateway to hell.
Oh my God.
I mean, to be fair, if somebody told me you should come to this bed and breakfast, like you get English muffins every morning, and also there's a gateway to hell, I'd be like, I'm in. Show me to the hot tub. I'm totally in. That's not what they were thinking. They were just being dumb. They weren't even going to capitalize on that, and they did, and they purchased it. And then for some reason, like a year into it, they abandoned the project, and now it's abandoned again because there's a gateway to hell there. And you can't build a bed and breakfast. It doesn't matter if you're from Chicago. It doesn't give you special powers. You can't mess with that. Jesus.
That would be one super hot tub, I think, if it was above the fires of hell.
Right. Don't bump. This is the hottest coffee I ever had in my life. Absolutely fantastic. All right. I'm going to tell you this story. I got to get buzzed now. I might refer to my notes from time to time because this one's a humdinger. It's a dilly of a dilly.
Good.
So my friend Ray found this one for me deep, deep in the bowels of Reddit, which is just a gold mine for this kind of
Reddit,
foolishness.
yeah.
I love Reddit so much. People hate it. I think it's great. It's just
You
a
can find some
Rorschach
crazy
test.
Yeah, you can find crazy stuff on Reddit.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And a lot of people are like, oh, that's not true. And I was like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Letters to Penthouse aren't true. Like, give me a break. I'm going to say it's at least half true. No, Dean. No, honey. Probably not.
My entire education when I was in my teens now has just been destroyed. Everything I understand about adult human interactions, you've just ruined for me.
No. Reading Letters to Penthouse is like reading the Iliad. It doesn't matter that it didn't happen. You still learned something, right? Like, that's true, isn't it?
True.
Okay,
That's good
great.
point.
Good. Fantastic. So the woman who wrote this, I think her handle was "I'm Chrissy really." So I'm going to refer to her as Chrissy throughout this entire thing. So apparently, Miss Chrissy, bless her heart, she was living someplace about 10 years ago, like 2013. She was in this apartment, and she started noticing when she was walking around this apartment that she was just getting like the feeling, like she sensed the presence, capital T, capital P. Like nothing weird was happening. She just never felt alone in the place. And she kind of blew it off, as most people will when all they're going on is the presence, because she's a skeptic, and also because this presence didn't feel malicious or angry or wicked. She actually felt really comforted by this presence when it was around. It felt really familiar. It felt really safe. So she was like, well, that's just a thing that's happening. I just like my apartment. It's got good natural light is what it is. And that's nice. It's perfectly fine. So this goes on for a couple months. And then one night she's in her bed, right? And she feels someone like sit down in the bed next to her. Like she feels the bed go down like this. And she presumes that it's her boyfriend, even though her boyfriend had said that he was out drinking with his buddies and wasn't going to be coming home that night because he had one too many. She thought for sure it was him, even though she locked the doors because he has the key. It's not a big deal. Yeah. So she then feels this big, meaty, that's how she described it. It's very romantic. This meaty salami of a hand on her hip, and like starts caressing her hip. And she for sure thinks at this point it's her boyfriend. Again, she doesn't feel threatened. She's not afraid. She's not, nothing like that. And so she.
It sounds like a penthouse letter. That sounds like
right?
a penthouse letter I read once. So.
You said you wanted ghostly love stories. God damn it! I'm here to deliver.
So
he's like rubbing his meat or whatever. I don't know, something, and like there's caressing that's happening. She rolls over to look at him, and it's dark in the room, so she can't see like any features on his face, but she absolutely sees his silhouette, like laying next to her in bed. And she was like, oh, hey, baby, like, come on over and have some of that stuff. And he got up out of bed. They turned his back on her, got up, walked around the bed, and walked over to the bedroom door. And she's looking, she's like, what are you doing? Like, come to bed. What are you doing? Come to bed. He turns around, he looks at her, and just stares at her from the bedroom door. So she gets up out of the bed and goes to move towards him, and he walks out of the door into the hallway. She follows him, and when she gets into the hallway, there's nobody there, which she thought was weird because the hallway was very long and apparently the floorboards were very squeaky. And she was like, how did he like move past me? I don't understand that. So she does a thing where she goes through and she turns on all the lights. She opens all the closets and she checks underneath all the beds and whatever, she gets out her EKG meter or whatever the hell she's going to do, but there's nobody there. There's nothing. There was nothing there at all. She was totally alone in the condo. So she goes back and she's sitting in her bed. She's like, did I just hallucinate all that? Like, I must have hallucinated all that.
Yeah.
That must have been some kind of weird sleep paralysis where I wasn't actually sleeping, but definitely that wasn't real. That couldn't be real happening.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, this is a person who had just described that experience as meaty. Meaty is not usually like, that's not your imagination. Once you start talking about meat, and that's like the adjective that you're using, but Miss Chrissy is like, surely I was mistaken. That can't have been a real thing. It was just some meaty hallucination. So she goes on with her life. Whatever. A couple nights later, she and her boyfriend drag their mattress into the living room. They're going to have movie night. They pass out watching movies. She wakes up, her boyfriend's sitting on the couch. He's drinking a cup of coffee, and he looks, a little pale and wan. He's somewhat like disturbed. And she's like, baby, whatever is the matter? Keep in mind, she has not told any of this to her boyfriend because she said that he was a big wussy, which is so sweet. Love stories. He's such a wussy. I love it. Hadn't said anything to him about any of this. Now, apparently, this poor guy, who we're going to call Craig suffered from regular sleep paralysis. Like, that was an actual thing that Craig actually had. Yeah. So he said, oh no, I just had like a bout of sleep paralysis, and it was a little bit unnerving because this thing happened. She said, well, tell me about it. He said, well, I woke up in the middle of the night. I was unable to move a muscle. I looked over, I guess just with his eyes and not with the rest of him because he's paralyzed. And I saw a dark shadow man sitting right next to you with his hand on your hip. And he was like touching your hip. And she was like, oh. And he said, yeah. And I normally, when sleep paralysis happens, I just try and go back to sleep and ignore it. But you were getting like molested by this shadow person, and I was trying to defend you. So I did everything I could. I was trying to scream. I was trying to shake. I was trying to roll off the couch. And this shadow man looked at me and he said, Chrissy, I could have sworn he was laughing at me.
Gosh.
Right, that's upsetting. I don't like to be mocked by the dead. That's not fair. You're not even corporeal. You need to shut up about that. But she had no choice at this time. She had to tell old Craig what was going on. So she tells Craig about the shadow man and the meaty caress or whatever. And he's like, oh, that's fucked up. She says, yeah. But they joked about it. From that point forward, it was kind of a joke. Like this was her ghost boyfriend or like whatever. So it was fine. It didn't matter. It was okay. So this goes on for, however long, where they're ignoring it. They're not having any trouble with it really, except that her boyfriend is not getting this warm, fuzzy feeling off of Mr. Ghostman. He's feeling more like creeped out, scared, unwelcome, threatened, not good, not okay at all. And Chrissy is just kind of like, haha, like, that's not real. This, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like through the entirety of this story, Chrissy, like it escalates in things that happen. And every time something happens, Chrissy's like, and anyway, I just went about my life because ghosts aren't real, even though my table is floating 4 feet above the kitchen floor. But surely there's some reasonable explanation for that shit or whatever. There's super not. It was a ghost, you guys. So she's like, like 4 months down the line, her Uncle Norm dies. That's really his name, is Uncle Norman. Poor Uncle Norman bites the big one. Super unfortunate. Extra unfortunate because she's in college at the time. Apparently has some ball buster of a professor who will not give her an extension to go to her uncle's funeral. Rude and weird.
Gosh.
So she drives the next state over to go to the funeral and pulls an all-nighter, goes to the funeral, and the second the funeral is over, gets in her car to drive back to the college to turn in this paper. What a jerk that guy was, that professor. Who does that? Who doesn't give you an extension for a fucking funeral? Unreal. Not cool. Well, it was probably something stupid too, like intro to English lit. That was fucking good. Whatever. whatever, liberal arts studies. She goes and she does this, and on the way there, predictably, she falls asleep behind the wheel and gets into a horrible, terrible car crash. She remembers like snapping awake and seeing this wall coming at her at like 70 miles an hour. And she remembers putting her arm up over her head. And that's the last thing she remembers until she like comes to in her car. And then she like unbuckles her seatbelt, throws open the door, runs out of the car, turns around and looks behind her and looks at her car, which is just totally schmucked. It's absolutely destroyed. It's like Wile E. Coyote, Warner Brothers, like accordion. The whole thing is just crunched up like a beer can, except for the tiny little bubble that was the driver's compartment, which is where she was sitting. She said when she looked at the car, anybody who would have been in that car would have been dead. Dead-a-roni. And so she has that moment where she's like, oh my God, like, am I in shock? I've got to be like broken. I've got to have broken bones or cuts or something like that. So she starts like, spectacles, testicles, watch and wallet, just trying to figure out where like her organs must be falling out of her body or whatever. Nothing. She had a bruise on her right shin. That was it. She also crashed 3 blocks away from a hospital. The first car that drove by that stopped to help her was a car full of ER nurses checking her out to make sure she's okay. Again, none of this seems strange to Miss Chrissy. Does this faze Miss Chrissy? Does it? Absolutely not. Oh no, not this bitch. The universe is an open book to Miss Chrissy. This is all just another day for her. It's fine. So she thinks it's nothing. She thinks it's a fluke. Because of course she does, because she's Chrissy. That Chrissy, she's such a character. Her parents are super religious, and they think that Uncle Norman saved her life. Like she went to such great trouble to go to his funeral. That's what they think happened. So fast forward like 2 years, and her cousin goes to a medium, a psychic medium, because he was very close to Uncle Norman and wanted to see if he could make contact with Uncle Norman. So he goes to this medium. The medium says, there is someone named Norman with us right now. This is him telling his cousin Chrissy that this is happening. She hears the name Norman and once again is utterly nonplussed because she's no fun at all. There was a guy there named Norman. The medium then proceeded to tell the cousin that Norman says that your little cousin was in a crash on her way back from his funeral and that he was able to intervene to save her, and that he had the help of 2 other people. One of them was named Michael, and one of them was a gentleman in his 20s that Uncle Norman didn't recognize. This finally gets Miss Chrissy. She's finally shooketh when she hears this, because Michael was the name of her cousin, who had also died 4 years prior. And as soon as she heard this medium talking about this other person, this man in his 20s, who her uncle didn't know, who also stepped in to save her, she was like, I bet you that's my ghost boyfriend. I did that business. So she goes to a tarot reader. And the tarot reader says, look at these cards. That one's a tree and this one's a dog. And what it all means is this.
Yeah.
There's a past life situation going on. Got some soulmate business over here and there. And something about protection is also happening. And Chrissy's like, uh-huh. And the tarot reader is like, okay. So what happened was there was a person who had been your soulmate in another life. And even though you didn't have any memories with this person, they died young and traumatically. They were confused when they died. They were stuck here, but they gravitated back towards you because like souls will always find each other again. This is the part where the violins come up in the background, just so you know. You can't hear it, but it's happening. There's violins. People are crying. Niagara Falls, Frankie Angel. They found each other again. And that his whole purpose was to like protect her, which is interesting because she said she always felt like safe and protected whenever this like meaty ghost was around. And that he had stepped in to save her in this car accident. And then he had left, which was true because Miss Chrissy never saw him or felt him around ever after that car accident. He was gone. So that that was the story that I found. It took a lot of digging finding that gem on Reddit. Let me tell you what. Modern American people were not romantic like that. We're very cynical kids. Very, very cynical kids. Modern ghost stories are almost always like, I need to go buy $5,000 worth of highly scientific equipment and set it up in my basement so I can prove that there's a ghost down here. And I'm like, your walls are bleeding. There's a ghost. We know there's a ghost.
Yeah.
We don't need all that foolishness. But they almost never focus on the person who the ghost was before they were dead.
Yeah.
That's not what it's all about. And almost nobody falls in love with a ghost anymore. It's just sad. It's like we're not even trying. I love it.
Well, jokes aside, that's something we talked about a little bit the other day when we were chatting back and forth, is that there's this overwhelming urge, it seems to be, whether they're spectre hunters or cryptid seekers or UFO believers, to apply some type of scientific method to a phenomenon that science has never been able to verify. So, and I think it's a particularly modern thing to fall into that trap of scientism to explain an essentially romantic, in many ways, in the broader, older sense of romantic than necessarily what Valentine's Day means, explanation for whatever we experience. And I think that's a terrible failing. I think we lose something when we, as you were saying, we fall so into that desire to bring out some technological piece of equipment to solve the
because it's like if scary stories and ghost stories are the same as any other horror. In fact, ghost stories may be more so than any other kind of scary story, talking about what it is that frightens us, but also talking about what the mystery is, because it's our attempt to make sense of this big mystery, which is what happens to you after you die, and why are we conscious, and why are we even here at all?
Yeah.
And once upon a time, we wanted to make it about us as people, about the poetry of being a person, and about that morality, this idea that like there was God and angels, and like that's what was going on. And if you were good, then good things happened to you. And if you were bad, then you spent the rest of your life wandering through the swamp waiting to put yourself out or whatever. And now it's about our relationship to what we don't know and what we can't measure, and what our science and our systems is not equipped to tell us about the universe around us, which makes total sense, because like as a culture, that's where we are, where we're like, science is not filling in all these holes, you guys. Like that's not. We were talking a little bit about quantum physics, which is one of my favorite topics in the world.
Yeah.
This is very complex science, right? This very difficult math that ultimately, at the end of the day, just says that none of this is really happening. None of this is really happening. We have no idea is the short answer.
Right,
We don't know. We can tell you why this happens and why this happens, but this in between part, no idea. Quantum physics is like this thing that they think is going to be the thing that unlocks like all these secrets of the universe. Like they got the quantum computers now or whatever, which terrifies me. Quantum computing is scary. But it doesn't have all the answers. Like the thing that makes quantum physics work is the place where quantum physicists stop looking for the answer. That is true. They'll be like, we know it starts here and it ends over there. And if we just have faith, it's like some Peter Pan shit. Real life magic, you guys. Real honest magic. I like that. I'm excited to see what it does to ghost stories. I'm curious about it.
Is that why too, you think, because of our inability to perhaps solve some of these genuinely scary mysteries like you were talking about, that you apply so much humor to your stories? Because they're so funny, but there's such a darkness actually to them. Like you tell them, so they're laughable when you tell them, but when you stop and hear what you're talking about, it's actually pretty terrifying, some of the tales.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I don't know. When I have been the most scared in my entire life is when I have laughed the absolute hardest. And I think, again, it's like humor and horror are really closely connected to each other. I think they live in the same room in your brain because it feels the same. That's why, like, don't you, like, you're on a roller coaster, right? You're screaming. but you're probably
Mhm.
also laughing. I always laugh on a roller coaster because I'm having a good time. I'm scared to death. You don't know if you're going to make it to the end of a roller coaster because let's be
Mm-mm.
real. But like, I'm also like, you feel alive. It's invigorating. It's
Yeah.
invigorating to be scared. It's
Yeah.
invigorating to laugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, like,
I
you
think
have to
that's
acknowledge the.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
I
You
was
have to
just thinking
acknowledge
that's
the.
probably who did it again. Go ahead. I
You
will.
have to acknowledge the absurdity.
No, I was just gonna say that that's the reason why, you see so many investigators. They're searching for that
Sure. Yeah.
extra. Yeah, it's exciting and scary at the same time. And
Yeah.
of
Plus,
course you
there's
want
that
to find it.
possibility that
Yeah,
you'll have the answer.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Because you don't know. Like, it might just
No,
pop back up
nobody
again.
knows. Yeah, yeah. Nobody knows.
Yeah. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
And like,
Mhm.
I think everybody wants to like be witness to the unexplainable too. Because if you are like, okay, let's say like you see like a UFO, dog man runs off with your guinea fowl. Like you see that happen. You're like, that was for
Mhm.
sure fucking dog man. I did
Right.
not hallucinate that. You just witnessed a mystery. And at a certain point, you are allowed to not justify it. At a certain point, you are allowed to just be like, nope, I know what I saw. And you
Yeah.
so rarely get to do that in life, in real life. We spend so much time like trying to justify our existence in every possible way. But you don't have to
Mhm.
justify dog man. Some people are going to believe you and some people aren't. And that's all there is to it.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
Liberating. It's very liberating.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, your stories were liberating and invigorating and hilarious and an undercurrent of terror in them as well. So I can't thank you enough for joining us
bet.
tonight for this special Valentine's edition. You were the perfect guest. I think if we'd
Mhm.
searched the entire
Aw.
planet, we wouldn't have got somebody better than you for tonight's
Aw.
show, Heidi. So thank you.
Oh, that's so sweet. I had a lovely time. Thanks for having me on.
And we'll see you at Midwest Weird Fest, March 5 to 7 in Eau
Oh,
Claire,
yeah.
Wisconsin. Mike on
Oh,
Downtown
yeah, that
Cinema.
would be
You better
good.
be there.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. No, it's happening now. It's game on now. I got to tell you all those rum stories. I promise.
Yeah, you tell the rum stories, I'll buy. Can't do fairer than that.
Such a deal.
Yay.
Such a sweet
Yeah.
deal. I'm in. I'm super
Well, thank you so
in.
much. I hope you enjoy your Valentine's. I hope you enjoy your Valentine's Day,
Yes.
Heidi.
Oh, I
Yeah.
will. I typically celebrate Lupercalia, so it's more about chasing people around with meat and having orgies. So it'll be great. I'm a traditionalist like that.
We'll enjoy that vacation as well. Please. Thank you so much, and yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
It was nice to see both of you.
Nice to
lovely
see you
to see
too.
you. And we'll see you in
Right.
person
Bye,
at the
Ben.
festival.
Yes.
Maybe you will.
Bye.
Right. Okay. Bye.
Thank you for joining us tonight. If you're interested in checking out more episodes, you can find us at talkingweird.com. If you haven't already, please like the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talking Weird Podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to Talking Weird. We're available on most podcast platforms and YouTube. And if you do enjoy the show, please leave us a review. Dean and I would really appreciate it. Until then, stay safe and keep it weird.